With just 10 games to go in the regular season, Spence and I are breaking down whether or not the Cavaliers are feared by their other teams in the NBA. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Courtside with the Cavs on SI podcast. Welcome on into another episode of Courtside with the Cavs on SI. I apologize for my little stumble there. I'm used to doing so many podcasts at this point. I have to go through my Rolodex of show names to make sure I get to the right one. But we're here, Spencer German, Spencer Davies, and we encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, review the podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, etc. And, of course, at the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI YouTube channel, where many of you might be watching this right now. So we appreciate you stopping on by, being part of the conversation, being part of the show. And I want everyone to know, Spence, maybe not in graphic detail, but I want everybody to know that I am batting very wounded today because I'm battling a stomach bug. But you know what, Spence? Rain, sleet, snow, sickness, and in health, I will always be here as your partner of this podcast to do the show. So I'm here.
That is really, really touching. To be honest, I really appreciate your dedication and your commitment to Courtside with Cavs on SI. This is very meaningful to me, so thank you very much for
I saw
getting
the tear.
through.
I saw the tear come down your face.
Getting through the nausea and everything else going on in your life at the moment. I am very appreciative of it, so thank you.
Quick backstory, I'll just say, my son got sick over the weekend with a stomach bug, and I was texting you about this before we got recording here, Spence, like, when I was a kid, I remember my mom like taking care of me when I was sick with this type of thing. And then like, I never saw her get sick. Now, maybe she was just hiding it. Like, I don't know, maybe she had a secret pot in her room that she was throwing up in and she just didn't show me that she was getting sick, but it never seemed like she got sick. And so I thought like by default that when I was a parent, like, oh, that's the trade-off, right? You have kids, they're going to drive you nuts sometimes. They're going to get sick. But the trade-off is you don't get sick when they get sick. And that has not been the case for me. I feel like I've caught everything that Jackson has caught to this point. So here I am. But trying to have a good show. We should have some fun today. And excited about it to take my mind off of all that to talk Cavs with you, Spence.
You deserve a lot better. You're being a good dad. You're doing all the right things. And what are you rewarded with? Oh, just exactly what your son has.
Yes.
So, so goes the world, apparently.
Yeah, so I'm powering through. We should have a fun episode here, and I want to start with some inflammatory comments we could say, Spence, that were made by Patrick Beverley, former NBA star, on a podcast this week that I think were pretty notable and caught some people's attention. And I do think it sort of sets up an interesting conversation with just 10 games to go in the regular season, playoffs just around the corner, about how the Cavs are sort of perceived as they go into the postseason. And the exact quote on his own podcast, the Pat Bev pod, was that, quote, "No one is afraid of the Cavaliers. The minute Darius Garland chooses not to take defense serious, they're going to lose. The minute Donovan Mitchell doesn't take defense serious, they're going to lose. Defense wins championships. Offense sells tickets." So I think there's some different angles to attack this one. I think the last part about not taking defense seriously, I think both those guys have kind of bucked that trend this year. Like, they seem more invested in defense than maybe ever. And bought into that. And I do think like maybe you can point to the recent stretch where defense has been bad for the team. But when push comes to shove, like, I am of the belief that when the playoffs get here, Spence, that's going to be ramped back up for everybody. And they're going to be locked in on that end of the floor because we know they're too good on that end of the floor not to be. But in terms of like whether or not teams are going to fear the Cavs, I'm curious your thoughts on this because I wonder, we might actually have different perspectives here. And I want to hear what you have to say about that concept first.
You definitely have to prove it first and foremost that you're the big dog when it comes to the postseason. We all know that. I don't necessarily think that they're fearful of the Cavs the way they're fearful of Boston. I think that the Cavs and like the Thunder are on the same level as far as that goes, and appropriate fear, I guess. So I'm not saying he's completely out of left field here. I do disagree with the fact that they thinks that they don't play defense. I think that, as you just said, they're going to turn it up to another level when it comes to the first round and really reestablish that end of the floor, be more on their A game as far as guarding the ball, guarding the perimeter, and making sure that they're on their P's and Q's as an individual defensive team and as a team defensive team. We'll talk about the concerns a little later in this show that maybe they have shown in March and past All-Star break, but I don't know about the fear thing. I feel like they have to prove themselves to be the big bad wolf, so to speak, first before you get to a team that actually is scared of you. And he's right about offense selling tickets, but the thing about this is the Cavs don't have one singular style of play, and that's going to bode well for them in the playoffs, especially because the array of opponents they could have in the playoffs have different styles. You've got the grinded out physical types that will wear you down but won't beat you because they can't keep up in the offensive scoring column. And then you have the high-paced teams that might shoot themselves out of a game because they're trying to play a track meet, whereas the Cavs, they can kind of match you on all three levels of pace. So I feel like being equipped in so many different styles and genres of the game really bodes well for the Cavs. And of course their depth. Their depth's a whole other story too.
Well, and the defensive thing, just to hit on that real quick, like I that's the part of the quote I disagree with completely, to your point. Because like even with this recent stretch that the Cavs have had, where they've had some defensive lapses, I think is a fair way to put it. They're still top 10. They're still 8th in defensive rating in the NBA. Like they're still a very good defensive team, largely because of how well they played early in the season. But like we know that's in there. Like we know they pride themselves on that end of the floor. They will get back to that, especially when things get tighter in the playoffs. So again, I'm not worried about that. But I will say this, and this, I thought maybe you'd go a different direction than me, but I think we're actually kind of in agreement on this because I can give some credence to what Pat Bev is saying. Like I think he is right on some level because it falls into that bucket of, at least about the first part, it falls into that bucket of proving it, right? And Donovan Mitchell's talked about that. He knows he has to prove in the playoffs to be really considered a superstar. He knows this team hasn't achieved the things that he expects them to achieve. They know what the end goal really is. And so it falls into that category of, like until you do it on that stage, there isn't going to be this magical just fear that sets in where people are like, we don't want to play them. It's you're not the Golden State Warriors yet, right? Like of that era. You're not even the Celtics yet. Like the Celtics, I do think to like you said, are the team that are the most feared in the postseason because let's face it, they're the defending champs. You alluded to it. The Cavs and the Thunder may be in the same sort of category here. I think those are teams that like these other playoff teams are going to have a healthy respect for. Like they're going to respect the fact that those two teams are really, really good. They had really good seasons, but there always is that overarching or like that cloud hanging over some of those teams where it's like, you still have to do it on this stage. You haven't shown me enough. And we talked about this on a podcast. I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where it was like, do they have enough playoff experience to win a title? We said yes, but to the NBA world, like they might be like, nope, you haven't been battle tested enough. You got to prove it against the Celtics. You got to prove it against some of these other really good teams and show that you can survive that gauntlet of a season that is the postseason. And so I can understand where, they maybe aren't feared going into the postseason. I also, though, Spence, don't think that's a bad thing because I think this team thrives on being counted out. I think this team thrives on, this narrative around them that like they're not tough or they're not going to be able to get the job done or they haven't proven enough. That's the type of stuff that I think can be super motivating for people like Mitchell, and he keeps track of those things and uses it as fodder for his team. And so I think that just motivates this team even more to, realize what that end goal is and go push for it even harder.
Yeah, and if you even look at the press the last couple of days, Slam Magazine, you have the cover with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, great interview with Daisha Smith. And then you look at Cleveland Magazine yesterday with Darius and Tristan, and you can tell that there is a self-awareness there. There is absolutely that chip on the shoulder that you need in order to get to that next level. And there's ghosts. But they are absolutely locked in on knowing what the next step is and what the goal is of winning a championship. We've been over this over and over again.
Yeah.
But until you get to that point, you just kind of have to play the waiting game and you have to play through these games. And we're almost there. Thank goodness. I've said you can't have a fast forward button for about a month and a half now. We're getting there. We're getting there, man. It's the end of March. You're getting towards that April. And then before we know it, it'll be the first round of the playoffs. So you're almost there. So now it's the time to refocus a little bit. I think that they close their road trip out on a high note, which is a big, big thing for the psyche. And you come back and you have this bear of a schedule. You're starting again to close out the season. But it's good that they know in the back of their minds what needs to be done and what it needs to be accomplished. And also the doubters, too, on the outside, that they say that they don't worry about, but you know that it's in there. You know that they hear it.
Oh, for sure. And you know me, Spence, like I hate boiling down an entire NBA season to do it in the playoffs. I do think there's certain things you learn about teams in the regular season. We've talked so much about habits being one of those things. And yeah, there are certain teams like when LeBron was here that could just flip that switch, and the habit thing didn't really matter if they were lazy on some nights because they knew when they got to the postseason, everyone's going to step it up a notch. But this Cavs team has built good habits. And so, yeah, like I think the regular season matters. I can't look back on what the Cavs have accomplished this year already and are likely to accomplish here in the final 10 games, closing in on trying to lock up the 1 seed in the East. Unless something really goes bad, they're going to have over 60 wins this year. That's not for nothing. There's a number of things they're going to do and accomplish that are noteworthy. So I can't let that all just be boiled down to like, well, it doesn't matter until the playoffs, because I think those things matter. But yes, like in the eyes of some of these other NBA teams, until you dethrone the king, that is the Boston Celtics, until you get to a certain level, I don't think, I think there's a healthy respect from other teams around the league, but I don't know if you're like feared the way, like I mentioned, the Warriors were back in the day, or the Celtics kind of are right now, because they know that team is damn good.
Yeah, there is definitely that kind of gap between the big dog, like I said earlier, and somebody who's kind of fresh to this as a contender. Because even last year, they weren't a contender. This is the first season that we've really seen them as a contending team who is, knock on wood, staying healthy and is being as consistent as they've been all season long. I know that March has been a slip up, but this is a West Coast trip that happened, and it happens to every team, no matter if it's a long road trip out west or if it's a Western Conference team coming out east. There's just all sorts of things, different game time, start times. Like it's just a big mess. March is a mess in general. You got teams that are competing for playoff spots and play-ins, and they have more juice than the best teams at the top because they've already kind of cemented where they're going to be in the playoffs, whereas there's a desperation from another side. So this is the month of March. This is how it goes. I take nothing really too much away from that road trip, and they're going to be focused when they get into the playoffs, especially you think about the break they're going to get between the end of the regular season and the first week of the playoffs while they wait to find out who their opponent's going to be from a play-in tournament perspective. I think that's also a huge key in all this.
Yeah, and that is going to be massive, I think, for Donovan Mitchell, who's dealing with the injury situation right now. They're trying to kind of get him back healthy. That week off could be massive for him. And one last thought on this, Spence, because we brought the Celtics so much in this conversation. Look no further than what happened the last time the Cavs and Celtics played to know how other teams feel about the Cavaliers. And I get it. It's a different beast. They're the defending champs, so they get a little more swag to the way they do things. But you remember watching Jason Tatum. They go up 28-5 or whatever it was, and he's throwing the thumb over the shoulder like, get the F out of here. He's tossing the Cavs out of the club saying, get out of here. And then the Cavs mount this great comeback and they win. But that, to me, was like a public image that I'm associating with these Pat Bev comments. That is how other teams kind of view the Cavs. They're like, listen, until you take us down, until you take down the team that won the championship last year and prove it that you can do it to us in the playoffs, we know we're superior than you, and we're going to throw you out. We're going to throw you out of our building the way that Jason Tatum was trying to do. So that image is kind of etched in my head as we talk through this entire conversation, because I think that sort of epitomizes what Patrick Beverley's talking about.
King of the mountaintop.
Yeah.
Someone's got to knock them off, but until then, they're still sitting there
for sure
at the top. That's just how it is, and that's just kind of how championships work until you take down the beast. And I don't know. You look at like the Chiefs in the NFL, right? Like until they got knocked out, and they got knocked out hard by Philly this year. That was the standard. And they had won 2 in a row looking for the three-peat. Boston's looking to do pretty much the same thing. I know that's a cross-sport comparison, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a fair comparison. I mean, we always say in these sports. Like if you beat the champions, that sort of legitimizes you. And I'm sure the Eagles enjoyed the fact that they got a rematch with the Chiefs trying to go for a three-peat, because there was no one questioning like the run, right? There was nobody looking back and being like, well, the Chiefs didn't get there, so what if you had played them? No, like they took it to them and they proved that they were the better team this past year.
And
use that football example.
Equally, I mean, like, the Cavs could end up being the Buffalo Bills. We don't know.
Yeah.
Like
two teams are like playing at their best with great quarterbacks at the exact same time, and they're going to be a tough team to get past. You're right about that. Yeah.
So like that's also another way that this could go. And until we see it, that's, we just have to kind of
for sure
take a guess, take a stab at it.
And I do think those first couple series will be telling as well. Like if they coast through the first two rounds where they're like winning in like 5, like that'll be a testament to like, okay, this Cavs team is legit. And the one team that seems to stand in their path is Boston. And I think that will get more people pivoting away from Pat Bev's feelings here that he expressed. And they'll feel like the Cavs are a legitimate contender on that stage rather than just in the regular season. Because it's easy to say it in February and January and March. It's another thing to say, like to see it in action in the postseason. But Spence, we've talked so much about this road trip. We know the struggles. They lose the first 4 games of it, win the last 2, and they get a chance to, come home on Thursday and get the ship sort of righted here to get back on track. And we have been pretty adamant that we're not overly worried about this team. Like we thought that, there were some mistakes. There were some things that weren't characteristic of the Cavs, but there was context. They were playing teams that were in the play-in tournament, trying to sort of fight for a spot. They were, getting everybody's best shot. Kevin Durant goes off one night. Kawhi Leonard goes off one night. Like there's some nights that's just how the cookie crumbles. Like it's just how it's going to go. And we've been pretty adamant again that we're not overly concerned as a whole about the Cavs. We think they're going to be okay. But that doesn't mean we didn't come away from this road trip with some things that are concerning. And I know you wanted to talk a little bit about something that you're going to be keeping your eye on these last 10 games that has to get corrected if this team has hopes of going deep into the postseason.
Yeah, you got a defensive rebound. They're doing the job of getting the stops, and we just talked about the defense and how it's just kind of had a little bit of slippage. They're getting stops, but you have to be able to grab the boards after that. And I think that a lot of the times Jared Allen gets lumped into this, and there are situations where he has gotten pushed around. I'm not saying he hasn't, but more often than not, it's because he switched out onto the perimeter, which is leaving guys like DeAndre Hunter and Max Strus and some of the guards to have to battle these bigger centers that they face off with. Now, not every team in the postseason is going to have these bruising centers like it's the 1990s or the early 2000s. It's not going to happen always like that. But for those matchups, that's a weak area for the Cavs. So they have to figure out ways to be in better position for these rebounds. They have to figure out whether they're going to put 2 on a body when the ball goes up or something like that, because second chance opportunities have been burning them. And I know that that's going to be a point of emphasis for the Cavs moving forward as they go into the postseason and figuring out ways to secure possessions. That Portland game, they won because they made a lot of tough shots and DG took over down the stretch. But the Blazers had 12 more shot attempts than them in that game. That's not going to fly with Kenny Atkinson. He wants to play the possession game. He wants to make sure that they get more shots up than the opponent and that they're playing the pace that they want to. So they have to dictate it. They have to be able to grab those boards after the stops. And I know it's tough too, because as I was talking to with Danny Cunningham earlier, Locked On, he was talking about how in the zone, it's really hard to get rebounds sometimes because of where you're at on the floor.
Yeah. And especially with how the Cavs play, because they space out, like they're not just crowded around the paint. Like they play this like spaced out sort of game. And I get like when you're on defense, it's how the other team's playing, but they try to run, they try to get up and down the court. So like sometimes there's just not anybody there to grab the boards. You're right.
And long rebounds too. In the current NBA, how many times do we see teams jack up 40 to 53s a night?
Yeah.
And those boards, you have to track them down. So that also falls onto the guards. That falls onto the wings. So, you got to see DeAndre Hunter rebound better. I think that seeing DG get in the mix the last few games has been a good sign because he's actively chasing the ball. I think Max Strus has been a good rebounder. Dean Wade is a really good defensive rebounder, and they might need to lean on him more going forward in those situations. So making sure that you don't get punished by second chance opportunities, that's pretty much my biggest bugaboo for them at the moment. And as I mentioned last episode, making sure that third quarter defense is up and ready to go. I think they've done well the last couple of games on that, but making sure that you're ready out of the locker room. So those are the two things that I'm looking at, and I'm sure you have another one. There's another one that pops up into my mind, but it's most the obvious one, though.
Yeah, well, and I want to say, I think the rebounding point is a good one. It's something that's kind of come on your radar the last week or so when they were on this road trip. And you're right, like that is something. We know how much coaches emphasize rebounding. We know that's going to matter in the postseason, and so cleaning that up a little bit is key. I was going to really lean on the third quarter part of this, whether it's defense or offense. Like there's been some sluggish offensive third quarters that the Cavs have played lately. They've been better. They've been scoring like the 30s coming out of the gate in the third quarter of the last couple games. So they're sort of back on track in that way. But yeah, the third quarter defense has been bad. And the reason I'm more concerned about that than anything, Spence, is that's kind of been a trend this whole year. Third quarters have been a bugaboo for this team. And Kenny Atkinson's talked about it for whatever reason. Because I think, if I remember correctly, I think he had a quote one night about how he's got to give like better halftime speeches. Yeah. To coming out to like get his guys motivated. Because he couldn't really answer why it's a thing. But that is something, I mean, I remember, again, we like to bring up the Golden State Warriors during their dynasty days. But like, I remember one of the things that made the Warriors so demoralizing was like, you could be in a tight game going into the half with them, like down, like within 10, right? Like within like 10 to 6, somewhere in that range. And then they would come out of the third quarter and they would just bury you. And so like that quarter is so important in terms of like sometimes killing the spirit of another team, or just like sort of cementing that you're the better team in general. So yeah, that the third quarter, just effort in general, I think is the thing that I'm looking at, because that's been a constant problem this year. And when we think about habits that you're building throughout the season, that's been one bad one that I have obviously noticed quite a bit.
Yeah, and you can look at, switching up the rotations a little bit. The super subs, Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter really get the legs going coming out of the locker room. So more or less it's on the starters to pick up where everything was left off in the first half. They have to be the ones who bring the energy out of the gate coming out of the locker room. So like you said, they can bury them. Most of the time this year, a lot of the burying was done in the first half, and that's why we didn't have too many competitive third quarters, and that's kind of tough to keep that focus when that happens and you're up by 40 at half, like we saw against the Warriors, or another 2 or 3 games that we saw that ridiculous amount of separation going into halftime. So that's probably why it's been not great this year, because they've been so comfortable up as much as they've been. And human nature is just like, all right, we're up by 40. Not saying we can coast, but we're not going to be as locked in. It's not like it's a 2-possession game and we have to get a stop every single time down. Like that's what the Blazers game was. That's why I loved the Blazers game yesterday, because it was something where they had to be in a situation where they have to guard hard every possession. There were very few big gaps, right? Like I think the largest lead in that game was 11 or something. And it was really competitive ball against a hungry team that was chasing for a play-in spot and for a spot in the postseason. And it was an athletic and young team too, so they had to really dig down deep on the road, your last leg of the road trip, and come out with a W, and that's what they did.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that we didn't mention is like you said, the obvious one, which is Donovan Mitchell's struggles are concerning at this point. You wonder if it is injury related, because he's kind of on this injury hiatus right now, getting himself right, if it's sort of stemming from that groin issue. But it's a fair approach for Kenny Atkinson and the staff to take to keep him out, because you want him healthy. That's been the number one thing people have talked about, right? The most important thing the rest of the season is get everybody healthy for the playoffs, make sure everyone's good. And Donovan Mitchell's at the core of that. So, I don't know how much you think that's had to do with it, the injury side of this, or if it's just like a slump. I sort of feel like it's more just a slump, and they're kind of getting him off his feet and just making sure he's totally healthy before the playoffs are here. But yeah, like that's one that we can put that in the category of I'm not overly worried about that, because Donovan, like any NBA player, is susceptible to slumps, and sometimes they happen. And, I trust that by the time the playoffs get rolling, the last game of the regular season is April 13th. And then like a week after that, at least 6 days after that following Saturday is probably when the Cavs will play their first game. Like by April 19th, 20th, I trust that he'll be out of this slump the same way I think Darius rather, has kind of got himself out of the slump that he's been in.
I think that Donovan has the mental capacity to deal with the slump now, where he's just not going to bury himself because he's having an off shooting. There was some ridiculous statistic that Danny told me when we were on his show earlier, and it was something like 7 for 55, 7 for his last 55 from deep, which is insane. We know that's not Donovan Mitchell, okay? Like, obviously, you don't want to see that this late in the season, but you also don't want to see it a month from now. So if he's doing it now, if he's getting these shooting woes out of the way, that's probably the better case scenario than if it was happening in the first round. We know that Donovan has been a better shooter for this team this year. All season long, he's been taking the most threes of his career. He's also getting to spots. He's been a hell of a job as a playmaker, getting to the middle and throwing it out. The encouraging sign for me was, I know it was Utah, and it's not the best example because the Jazz are not playing good basketball right now, but the fact that he was attacking the rim and getting to the free throw line to see it go through the net, because that's what's going to bring him up to getting that shot back. We're not seeing Donovan at the left wing creating his own shot with the step back between the legs sidestep that we've seen him do so many times. I feel like it's a really good thing for him to go through this now so that it doesn't hurt you later down the road, which is when it's going to be the most important. He's definitely probably bothered by it more than he's leading us on, but I feel like this has also been happening before the injury occurred, which was in Charlotte a couple weeks ago. And it's really been post All-Star break. And if you really want to go that far, probably since like February. So after he won Player of the Month, that's when the shooting's gone down. And he's also been trying to kind of force it, I think, a little bit too much, some of those shot selections. But the only way to get out of it is to keep shooting. Yeah. And you want your best player on the team to continuously shoot and have the ball in his hands. And eventually it's going to get better. This is one of his worst stretches since his rookie season, shooting the basketball. It's gonna go away. It's not going to continue, I don't think.
Well, and if there's anybody that's going to get the latitude to shoot themselves out of it, it's going to be Donovan Mitchell, right? Like, he's going to be given the leash to, hey, do what you got to do, get yourself out of the slump. We trust you. Kenny Atkinson will, put faith in him, and I'm sure he'll be okay. But it is alarming when your best player isn't playing well. It's funny that we always just kind of jump to the injury thing. I don't know. It doesn't seem like this is going to be something that's an extended absence for him. Like it sounds like he's going to be back before the end of the regular season, but is there like a certain amount of games that you feel like you need to see Donovan for at the end of the year to sort of get a good feel of like where he's at and if he's going to be okay?
It depends on wrapping up the number 1 seed. I mean, it's pretty much wrapped up now. I mean, 5 games and 10, 11 or 5 game lead and like 10, 11 games left of the season is really, really hard to give up, especially when you see the Cavs are taking on the Spurs tomorrow night. And then, you look at some of the games on the
11
schedule.
games to go. Just to count.
There you go.
To get you the official count.
I would like to see him in like 3 to 4
10 games. You were right. I'm sorry. I miscounted. Math.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? I think you would like to see him in 3 to 4 games, get that physical back, that endurance, and making sure that he can run up and down and obviously get to the rack, be himself. These scheduled rest days, I think, in March have definitely been helpful, even though it's been a bear of a schedule, and they've played a lot of games in March in a lot of different places, a lot of back-to-backs. I think that the scheduled rest days are definitely going to help when it comes to the first round of the playoffs. So Donovan doesn't need to like sit for the next 2 weeks and, come back for the last 2 games. Like, I think he'll be back before that. And I think that this groin maintenance is more or less precautious, the way that they speak about it, but they've done this to us before in the past as far as how honest they are with their messaging and injuries. So I'll take it with a grain of salt, but I believe Donovan when he says he is okay, I would say.
So what's interesting about the remaining schedule for both the Cavs and the Celtics is that the Celtics right now are red hot, while the Cavaliers are obviously coming off of the losing streak that they had, getting back on track towards the end of their road trip. But both teams have 10 games to go. And the Celtics, Spence, actually have one of the easiest strength of schedules left in the NBA. They play the Suns later tonight. They play the Spurs, who obviously are dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. No Wemby, as we know. The Grizzlies. And those are probably like Well, they still play the Knicks again, but they've kind of owned the Knicks this year. And Orlando's a good team. But like after that, like the Suns are a fringe playoff team in the West. They play them twice. They play the Wizards. That's an easy one. And then they end the season with the Hornets in back-to-back games. The Cavs, meanwhile, I think have clearly a tougher schedule than what Boston has. They got the Spurs tomorrow on the road against Detroit, which is a very, very tough team. JB
on Friday night.
Yeah, on the second end of a back-to-back.
Insane.
Yeah.
Clippers on Sunday.
Clippers on Sunday, which we just saw them lose to them. The Knicks at home. Spurs again for a second time over the course of a week. And then you get the Kings again, who just beat you. And then the Bulls, which is probably your easiest game left. And then other than that, it's like Pacers, Knicks, Pacers to end the year. So that's a tougher schedule for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here panicked about them locking up the 1 seed. Like you said, it would take an absolute collapse of all collapses, like a collapse of epic proportions, like historic.
Especially having won the last 2 games. That was, I think, the one where I was like, all right, that's solidified now.
Yeah, you know what? You're right about that. Like, that steadied things for me. If they had lost one of those games, I think, like, fans, this team's coming home, and they're a little worried. Because it would have been a 4-game deficit. They only would have been up 4 games. Celtics, like I said, are red hot right now. They have won, how many games in a row? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 games in a row. So like they're sort of going the opposite direction of you right now. So yeah, I've been pretty adamant, like holding off the Celtics is key. I know people are getting hung up on whether or not they're going to have the number 1 overall or like the home court through the entire playoffs, even in the Western Conference, over the Western Conference. I'm not as worried about that. Like, yeah, would you like that? Sure. But I think it's going to play more of a pivotal role, Spence, in the Eastern Conference when you know that I think the 3 best teams in the NBA are the Celtics, the Cavs, and the Thunder in no particular order, but I think that's sort of the list there. So when you know you have like 2, like your path to the finals is going to have to go through the Celtics probably, most likely, unless something crazy happened. Like it's, you having home court would be absolutely massive in the Eastern Conference at least. And then I'll take my chances against the Thunder, even if it's going on the road for a game 7 against them.
Yeah. You want to definitely lock up home court against the Celtics, which they essentially have. It just, you got to take care of business against the Spurs tomorrow night coming home, which isn't going to be easy. You're going to be on West Coast time still in your mind. So that's a 4:00 start basically on their internal clock at the moment. So that's never easy. And the Spurs are coming off of a 30-something point loss to the Pistons. And then you have to go up to Detroit to face the Pistons, who are now looking to get up into the 5 seed because obviously awful news with Milwaukee and Dame Lillard having the blood clot and the deep vein thrombosis. So they're going to be fighting for playoff positioning too. And then the Clippers doing the same thing, and you face them at 3 p.m. on Sunday. So this is like, just think about the schedule here at the moment. Like, it's
a tough schedule. Yeah, I mean,
it's a very tough.
That's why I compared it to the Celtics, because the Celtics schedule is way more like it's smoother to navigate that schedule than what the Cavs have. This is a tough schedule to end the year. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Now I don't think they're,
and that's coming off of a West Coast trip too. Like that is what's tough about.
They got no favors.
3 and 4 coming back home. You barely have a day. So yeah, it's probably not going to be easy these next 3-4 days. But if you can come out like 2-1 and take care of business, you control your own destiny at this point. Yeah. I think even if the Celtics have their schedule the way it is, the magic number is down to like 5 or something like that. So it's they can take care of business. I have no doubt in my mind they can take care of business. Even without Mitchell, they looked pretty damn good in Portland.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about them blowing this lead? I'd probably say like a 1.
Yeah, I would say like a 1. To be honest, I would put it on a 1. Shout out James Bridges, by the way.
I was going to throw this comment up from our guy, JB Smooth 84, James Bridges. He says, if they lose the 1 seed, they'll deserve any of the criticism and doubt going into the playoffs. I think that's a really good point. We led the show talking about Pat Bev's comments about how teams don't really fear the Cavs anyway. If they were to blow this lead, like that's just going to be a testament. Like to Pat Bev can just point and say, see what I was saying? Like he'd be 100% right in that, because like that's the kind of collapse that sets a bad precedent for that time of year, the most important time of the year. You don't want to be going to the postseason with that on your resume, that you ended the season with some sort of losing streak that cost you the top seed. So, but I think they'll be okay, Spence. I really do.
Same here. Shout out to all the comments, by the way, JB. Appreciate you.
He joined late, it sounds like, unless he was here the whole time and he just like waited to jump in. But he literally he went topic by topic. He talked about how he threw this in there a couple minutes ago, talking about the Cavs still have to prove it. He was talking about Mobley and his assertiveness and Mitchell not being healthy. Like, he has listened to the entire podcast. And for that, James Bridges, you know that we appreciate you as always. We hope to catch you over at the arena here coming up in the coming weeks. So I think this is a good place to pause. I'm going to go lay down and get some more sleep because I feel terrible. But Spence, I'm glad we could get this episode in. I am TBD, by the way, for the game tomorrow. Here's the thing.
This man's going through it, guys.
With my son, this was like a 24-hour thing and it was gone. So there's a chance that like I wake up tomorrow and I feel like a brand new man and I'm good. But I also want to err on the side of caution because the last thing I want is to spread whatever the hell this is that I'm dealing with to another Spencer and a friend of mine. So I don't want to, or anybody in the Cavs media. Like, I don't want this to become like an epidemic of the Cavs media. So if I'm not feeling great or 100%, I may just be doing this one from home, but I think everyone would appreciate that. So we'll see.
Pray for his stomach, people.
We'll see how the rest of the day goes and tomorrow. But in the meantime, I implore you to like the podcast, follow the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. You can find us as well at the Cleveland Cavaliers and SI YouTube channel, where Spence will finally have a chance to upload some new post-game content. They got home from the West Coast trip, home game tomorrow, so you can hear what Kenny Atkinson and some of the players say tomorrow night after the game, as well as our usual post-game stand-up where we talk about what happened, what transpired out on the court. So we look forward to having those conversations with you, on top of more episodes of the podcast to come. And don't forget as well to head on over to si.com/NBA/Cavaliers to check out any of our written content as well over there. Spence, it's been fun, and let's hope that we're together tomorrow in person. We'll see.
Been a pleasure, my brother.
Take it easy, everybody, and keep on following with all things Cleveland Cavaliers with the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.